Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for waiting. Let us now open the WASHOKU-DO, the World Japanese Cuisine Show, the afternoon part. Starting from here, we have the pleasure of having 3 guests to have the wonderful, enjoyable talks. From GION Sasaki, Master Chef Hiroshi Sasaki, French Chef Thierry, Mr. Thierry Marx, and Moderator, Professor Tohru Fushiki, Professor of Nutrition of the Agriculture Faculty of Kyoto University, under the title of Unlocking the Secrets of Health, Wisdom of Tradition and its Development. Now, Professor Fushiki, you have the floor, please. Good afternoon. Together with Mr. Sasaki and Mr. Marx, Japanese and French chefs who are giving the mission to have the bridge between the 2 countries. Japanese cuisines are now making the inroads to overseas to be recognized by people in the world. In order for them to do so, I believe Japanese cuisine, its healthy aspect should be highlighted. With this as a strength, we would be able to appeal to the audience in the world. Other than that, some features, very Japanese, seasonality and palatability and taste of Japanese cuisines are something we would like to elucidate. Before we invite those 2 gentlemen, for some time, I would like to share some thoughts about Japanese cuisine. I am asked very frequently what the Japanese cuisine is all about. There are a lot of different thoughts attached to that. For example, history and current status and future, as was presented by Mr. Dukas, the cuisines are contemporary and it continues to change in Osaka dialect. So you have to enjoy the best of that at that certain point in time. Then you can enjoy the best of that. So the current status and history are the background for Japanese cuisine to make the inroads to overseas. As you know, Japanese cuisines are based on the various histories and experiences in the past. So the past history and its weight has to be fully utilized and reflected in the current contemporary cuisine. Another point is, throughout Japan, if we have uniform Japanese cuisine, it's not interesting. Each locality has its produces and local features and different characteristics. And those are embraced in Japanese cuisine as a whole. So locality and local aspects are something we need to focus. When it comes to health and nutrition aspects, we have to endorse the importance of Japanese cuisine with the numerics and the numbers possibly. And last comment, palatability and taste and techniques. Those are something which are required to prepare the best part of washoku. Healthy image. People say that's low calorific and low fat content, and it does have the very good taste. Is it really so? That is the question. In the restaurant, which has the history of 280 years, in Soden, Nakamura, very old with a history in the restaurant, this is the menu. They usually use this from day to day. I don't know whether it is legible or not. I went to the restaurant with my friends. I was very much satisfied and full enough. And we brought one whole full-course meal for one person and brought that to the laboratory for the chemical analysis. In numerics and calculation, this is by Nakamura. There are altogether 83 ingredients used. There was the exact weight in grams, and in terms of the calorific content, it was 927 kilocalories. But depending on the preparation, it differs. For fish, they try to get rid of the fat by boiling, and how you apply the taste will be different. We brought them back to the laboratory and checked those ingredients. I believe this was quite rare to make the analysis of those very old restaurant, 790 calories. It's not that you are not satisfied. You become full if you enjoy this whole dish. I was very much surprised. I thought the calorie will be much higher than this. And also the fat content, 24.9 grams is the weight. In calorific content, 25% is the fat or the lipid. This is in comparison with the Western style food. This is only 42% or so of the Western food. So this lipid fat content is very small. In Japan, you purchase the hamburgers, just normal hamburgers, I would say. 40% of the lipid is contained. But with those volume, with the full of content, it is only a little less than 800 kilocalories. It's a miracle. But people complain about the high sodium content, but it was 8.6 grams, not very much. Not too high in sodium. For diabetics and those people who are suffered from high blood pressure, apart from the real patients, I believe those are the types of the dishes they should enjoy for prevention. Furthermore, from those prestigious restaurants, we have received dashi broth from the restaurant, and we made the analysis. Interestingly, 100 cc, 7 kilocalories. Mr. Murata said almost nil in calorific content, and also the sodium concentration is 0.64%. This is minuscule. But it doesn't say that there is not less salt. They put the salt. It is not to add that with the salt, but they try to give sort of the spice by way of by way of salt. Kombu and katsuo dashi, with those types of the dashi, you do not require much salt to be added. And then dashi, Japanese broth. This is the base of the Japanese cuisine with low calories and very deep taste attached to it. By using dashi, we create a lot of dishes. This is a big difference from the Western culinaries. Of course, in Western styles, they do have the broth and soup, and also in Chinese food, but their soup is different from the Japanese dashi. They, for 1 hour or 2 hours or for a whole day, boil them, and amino acid and lipid and protein contents, they are extracted from those broth. But in the case of Japan, 1 minute after you put bonito or katsuo, after taking out kombu out of the heated boil water, it is only 60 seconds before you take out the kombu out of the boiled water. Why do we do this? We want to get the real pure umami, and we want to get dashi with the best of umami. This is the spirit of Japanese culinaries. Why is it important? Because we would like to make the best use of the ingredients. You know bamboos and bamboo shoots, young bamboo shoots which come in spring. With a very complex dashi, it's very difficult to appreciate that. So it has to be appreciated in the pure dashi. In May, and there are a lot of practices coming out, and that has to be enjoyed with the pure dashi. Otherwise, it will lose its taste. In order to make the best use of the best of the ingredients, they are supported by dashi, and it is also naturally created. This is the economy of subtraction, not the addition in Western style. By the end of the day, you try to subtract unnecessary things, and at the end of the day, you come up with the pure umami in dashi, so that you would be able to appreciate the natural beauty. So this is rather awesome to nature. I went to the food expo in the United States a few years ago. Natural is very much appreciated as a popular word in the United States. They love something natural, anything natural. And whenever you talk about natural in 500 booths, most of them are rather gaudy, natural. What we call natural was quite different.
So there was a Japanese company's booth, and then they said, our natural is yellowish old and light brown, but natural in the United States is a different concept. So I went up to their booth and I said, why is this natural? And they said, because these ingredients come from natural materials. We, Japanese, we take nature as it is, but their point of view is that if we take something from nature, then that's still natural. So we see natural in a different way. For us, natural has to be their nature, but they try to extract things from nature. So the concept of being natural is slightly different. This is confectionery, and we do not really regard this as being natural, but because the ingredients come from natural products, they call these natural. So Japanese cuisine, we try to become one with nature, and we do not want to modify nature and then cook in a pure way. And that probably looks a bit mysterious from people from overseas point of view. So why is Washoku healthy or has healthy image? It did not just evolve that way automatically. In 1977, the Senator George McGivern, he got an order from President to think about healthy food and meals for the Americans because they have a problem of obesity and their heart diseases, so they wanted to change it through food. So he contacted with lots of nutritional researchers, and then basically the conclusion was that the fat intake has to be reduced by 40%, and then should increase the starch intake and reduce sugar, low cholesterol, and more dietary fiber. So basically eat more vegetables and more fish and lower salt. So that was the recommendation. Most Western people do not follow this advice today, but that was the advisory or recommendation from the senator. So this slide basically lists up the things that make you healthy. And this came out in the late 70s. Around that time, Japan was entering towards the end of its rapid economic growth period. It was a poor country, but was becoming wealthier country. That was in the late 70s to the early 80s. So there was a good balance. But after 2000, I think we Japanese people eat a little bit too much. So the Japanese washoku tradition around that time in the 70s and 80s was very well balanced. So around that time, people from overseas recognized washoku being very healthy and well-balanced in terms of nutrition. This is seafood and vegetables only. Very tasty, delicious, and looks good, and then satisfying too. So this is based on our tradition and history. So now let me invite Mr. Sasaki and Mr. Marx now onto the stage. Today we have two short DVD clips to show you first. Just some introductory films of the two chefs. Short DVDs to introduce the speakers. And then a video of when Mr. Sasaki went to France to promote Washoku in France. So the DVD about his story of struggle and challenge. It's a very short film, about 10 minutes. So starting with introductions of the two chefs.
愛弟子とその家族80人を前にパリへの熱い思いを語った。
和食を変えます。菊野野村さんはロンドンで勝負して和食を変えたと思います。でも僕はパリで変えたいです。ちょっとお酒飲んだからええかっこ言うけども、こう切ってや。はい。絶対切ってや。はい。村さんには負けへんで。
京料理を世界へ、それは菊野井村田義弘さんの長年の夢。佐々木さんは公私ともに尊敬する村田さんの背中を追い続け、日々精進。
これからパリとりあえず潰されるかいけるか、僕はやりたいですね。
今回パリを訪れた目的、それはパリの人たちに佐々木流の和食を初めて披露すること。食材の大半は現地で調達。
ごぼうに似た香りするよね。
会場は世界でトップ10にランキングされるホテルマンダリンオリエンタルパリ。2日間でおよそ100人の VIP を招く大型晩餐会だ。そんな佐々木さんのパートナーが。
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Moi, je suis allé à Kyoto. J'ai mangé dans son restaurant que je connais.
柔道三段黒帯のフランス人。彼は行く先々のレストランでミシュランの星を獲得。マンダリンでもオープンしてわずか半年で2つ星を。人呼んで星の請負人ティエリー・マルクス。世界の美食家たちが注目している料理人だ。佐々木さんの料理は素晴らしい。とても興味深いよ。佐々木さんはシェフであるだけでなくアーティストでもあるんだ。メルシー。舞台は再びパリ、鉄板焼きの間。
うちの料理長で。
これがお二人の。
So that was the introductory video of the two chefs, and we have one more clip. After this, Mr. Sasaki is going to go to Paris and then go through challenges and struggles.
必ずクリーンで真っ白で帰ってきてほしいね、やっぱりね。
成功が夢への条件。パリで初めて料理する。海外の慣れない厨房で仕込みスタート。
なんか水が出てるか岩出てるか分からへんからね。わけわからへん。
今回の目玉の一つ、パリのすき焼き。だし、濃口醤油、砂糖、炒めた牛すじで取ったスープに今が旬フランス産セップだけを煮込む。パリを驚かせたい。料理のイメージが完成したのはパリへ向かう機内の中。 ギリギリの勝負が続く。魚料理はフランス産のうなぎで、なんとソースにカラメル。グラニュー糖と水でカラメルを作り、濃い口醤油で伸ばしたかば焼きだ。果たしてポルトガル出身現地のスタッフに試食してもらった。フランスでもうなぎは食べるが、かば焼きではなくパテや赤ワイン煮にするのがメジャー。
どう？ラポは不思議。硬い。ラポーラc'est pas。
日本のうなぎと比べると身が締まって皮が非常に硬い。ハモの骨切りのように隠し包丁を入れることに皮目にもしっかりと。
いよいよ今からですね、佐々木さんが初めてパリで行うディナーショーに今から参加したいと思います。絵が強いですね、パリ。
成功の先に佐々木さんの夢が。ディナーショー開演。夢のパリで佐々木劇場開演。
今まだお客さんが入る前なんですけども、行われるということで、ほら
マンダリンオリエンタルパリ、このレストランが舞台だ。
ほら、ここであの佐々木さんが振る舞うんですからね。真ん中も。
しかしカメラ撮影はここまで。会場の片隅に発見したのはなんと日本酒。
日本酒もやっぱり日本の文化やから伝えたいっていうのと、いっぺん飲んでくださいっていう気持ちでお出ししたいなと思ってます。料理に合わせてさまざまな日本酒をプレゼンする。一皿目にはスパークリング清酒。初めて飲むというソムリエ。さて
これはとても感嘆すべきお酒ですね。発泡酒のスパークリング清酒はまるでフルーツのような甘みが心地よい。泡立ちが涼感を口の中にもたらしてくれます。
じゃあ一つよろしくお願いします。仕込みがきっちりできてるんで、味には自信あるんですよ。だからみんなが、うちのメンバーもここのメンバーもうまいこと合体すれば絶対いい料理を出せると思います。そう信じてます。はい。
祇園佐々木の若武者たちも知っている。晩餐会の成功が佐々木さんの夢パリ出店への条件だということを。鈴木南蛮漬けにはハムチーズの新女王を。2皿目は京都の秋がテーマの吹き寄せ。佐々木の気合がうかがえる和食だ。例えば今が旬のサバは筋目にした後皮目を炙りスモークチップで燻製に。繊細な京都の秋を表現する。3皿目はマルクスが担当。隠し味にみかんの汁を使ったホタテの揚げ物。何を振りかけている？
La peau de clémentine de Corse. Poudre de clémentine pour donner une petite pointe d'amertume, c'est tout.
テーマは苦味、香り高い大吟醸とともに。
食べた感じは非常に軽いんで。
軽いですね。
やっぱり今の時代の料理ってこね。
日本と比べると非常に硬いフランス産のうなぎ。隠し包丁を入れ香ばしく焼く。カラメルソースと実はヨーロッパでも人気のごまを使った黒ごまソースで。
佐々木さんの不動が皮パリ中ふわがヨーロッパのないからこんな感じになるとはまず。
椀物はオマールエビの頭から取ったスープと白味噌を合わせて。続いては手長エビ、黒大根、カラスミなどそのトッピングにマルクスが考えた日本酒ソルベを。大吟醸を加熱し、なんと生クリーム、牛乳を加える。
ほのかな甘さで美味しい。
さらにこの日仏コラボメニューに日本酒を効かせたカクテル。唐辛子、シナモンを加えラズベリーを。
爽やかさはありながら、やっぱりこう最後には日本酒を主張させるっていう、やっぱりそれとこの料理と合わせたっていうのは見事な感じで。
佐々木さんの料理にフランス人の反応は完食。ところが
遅いね出すのが。
京都ではダイレクトに客の反応を感じられるカウンター割烹。しかしここはテーブル席。佐々木さんは急遽レストランへ。客の目の前で A5 ランクの宮崎牛を焼く。そう、パリ限定のすき焼きは平皿で、スペイン産の豆腐の水気を切りソース状に、黄身酢にクリームチーズを加え酸味をプラス。
私のお気に入りは牛肉。美味しかったわ。作り方、味、質、何をとっても素晴らしかったの。
どの料理も本当最高だった。特に美味しかったのは
私たちが目指しているのはお客様の喜びと感動。まさに佐々木さんの料理は感動を生んだんだよ。
楽しい味っていうのが好きで、美味しいの上が楽しいやから楽しい味を出したいなっていう、いつもそう思って仕事はしてます。
この中に
So I think this video contained everything we want to discuss today. Mr. Marx, so everybody ate them all. In France, for the French chefs, are they interested in those Japanese cuisine because of this? Yes. French people, for many, many years, very much curious and interested in Japanese cuisine. In late 1970s, there was Nouvelle Cuisine. But those are the French chefs who studied in Japan and appreciated and impressed by the Japanese cuisine and brought the notion of kaiseki to France. And a little bit of everything, and the dishes were presented one after another. But after serving in the big dishes, they have converted with the small dishes, and there is the momentum these days, as was presented just now. The gourmets from Europe and America, they enjoy eating, they enjoy going to the restaurants, and they place themselves in the places they have never been to. And also, they can stay healthy even after eating a lot of food. Consumers spend a lot of money for those enjoyment and pleasure, and they prefer good agency and good life. So the dishes, cuisines prepared by Mr. Sasaki may be a little bit different from the authentic Japanese food. You brought that to France. But still, we think this is indeed a washoku. And yesterday, I was the judge in the culinary competitions amongst the foreign chefs. Even with the Japanese ingredients in front of you, you cannot complete the Japanese food. But Mr. Sasaki brought the foreign ingredients and created the Japanese dishes. Why was it possible? When you go to the different countries, in France or French, I believe each has its feature. But basic techniques are different, and also how you structure them are different. As you have seen the video, on the flat plates are decorated unagi eel. But if you eat them, that's the washoku style. The smells of soy sauce, that would give the difference from the Western food. What about the techniques? Technically, yes. We rent the kitchen for 1 week and prepared the food. We were not able to utilize the stove fired by gas. And French techniques, they have the admirable, wonderful techniques. And I really was impressed by French techniques. But Japanese techniques are something we can also take pride in. And I think I did my best. Mr. Marx, in France, you do not call those restaurants as the Japanese restaurants, but those restaurants are very much influenced by the Japanese cuisine. In your place, in your restaurant, how do you think is influenced by the Japanese cuisine? Yes, as you rightly said, I am directly and clearly impacted by the Japanese cuisine. Take an example of techniques, Japanese, Chinese, French cuisine. What's important? There has to be the very good preparation and cooking, cutting well by knife, and control the stove and fire and cooking with the right temperature of the fire. You have to have the mastery of those techniques. And also, each individual has to find himself the good recipe which was cultivated and nurtured. Japanese techniques of culinary cuisine has been succeeded from generation to generation. I told my subordinates, if the knife is not cutting out well, the sauce does not turn out to be very good. So, for example, Mr. Sasaki's job, as I see him working, maybe Mr. Sasaki sees me working. So those can be called the succession of the techniques, and those techniques are very much sophisticated. What's going to happen to the young people? I wonder whether they are able to succeed those techniques and traditions. Do they have the luxury to spend time to learn those traditional techniques? It's not that we prepare the uniform things. Something new, innovative has to be prepared, and I have to question those young people. They have to be talented.
So what about Japanese chefs for Washoku? Well, there are many chefs in this room, I guess. I was having conversation with Mr. Marx just before. For example, if you go to culinary school and you have all the equipment you need, and then you have all the manuals, how many minutes and what's the temperature, and roast beef can be made very easily. However, if chefs go somewhere traveling, and then if their friends tell them, you are a chef, so can you cook something? And then I don't want you to say, oh, I can't make anything because I don't have equipment. So use charcoal and grill well, and then use hot plate and then grill and cook well in French. So those things are important aspects, but young chefs lack in this and cannot make side dishes, sliced radishes. Then they don't know how to start cooking things. So including my young staff, I do not want the students to become chefs like that. So that's why I give tasks to my young staff to create side dishes within a cost of 2,000 yen. So for chefs, experience is important. You have to be face directly the food materials, and do not worry about making mistakes. Use your brain, your skills, and your senses to get what it is to cook, to establish your own techniques. That's the important thing. So the essence of washoku, or Japanese food, hidden accumulation of techniques, I think, is one of the most important elements. So I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Marx now. In the 1970s, kaiseki cuisine, many French chefs experienced kaiseki, and they were influenced by kaiseki, and the French cuisine is changing to incorporate the elements of Japanese washoku. Is that happening in France as well? Yes, exactly. That's what's happening. Why is it becoming more like Japanese cuisine? Is because in France and other countries too, we want to have meals that are more suitable to our lifestyle. Good food, but we do not want to eat too much. Traditionally, we've been eating almost too much, so we have to be more rational in our eating habits. And also environmental issues, we have to think more about nature. So the essence of Japanese meals resonate with what French people want. French cuisine has been very open to overseas traditions and incorporating various elements from overseas. So in the same way, Japanese food and washoku, in a more aesthetic and graphical ways. For example, you make soup without fat or temperature. And washoku was an important trigger for French chefs to think more deeply about French cuisine. So the concept of Japanese food is now incorporated into French cuisine. French chefs were deeply impressed by Japanese cuisine, so they cannot be indifferent to the tradition of Japan. So I guess we believe that washoku is healthy, and do French people think the same way about washoku? Yes, talking about Japanese food, we think it's healthy. They're not really aware of it, or they don't know scientifically why Japanese food is healthy. But we can see things like Japanese food eat raw materials, but not just that. More and more people in the world are started to be interested in Japanese food. So what's important is how to communicate Japanese food. There's one incident in Paris. There was a district, and there are many Japanese food restaurants signs. Many of these restaurants are not run by Japanese people, or people who do not know the basics and foundations of Japanese food. So that presents a risk of making washoku slightly different from authentic Japanese. So that's what concerns me a little bit. What about dashi? So do you think dashi techniques are properly communicated and passed on to French chefs? Well, I learned how to make dashi in Japan. I'm very interested in dashi. I was comparing that with bouillon or consomme soup. A consomme in France, that's the basis of various dishes in France. Dashi is, of course, very important, but now dashi is mass-produced these days. In everyday, day-to-day food, Japanese people use mass-produced, manufactured dashi. Not everyone is a chef. So in terms of real dashi, not even Japanese people know about it. We have to proactively teach young people about their culture. You have culinary assets, and those things have to be transmitted from grandparents' generation to younger generations. Well, that's true. Talking about dashi in homes, they don't use kelp and bonito or something. That's a restaurant's job. So they probably do it twice or 3 times a year. They use mass-produced manufactured dashi in day-to-day lives, so which is not necessarily bad, but I want people to know the taste of real dashi. Prior to this event, we had a conference, and I served my cuisine to the journalists and the media people of France. And then I served clear soup with bonito and kelp dashi. And response was not very enthusiastic. So I did not think that it would be successful. So as you saw in a video, I got dashi from prawn to make it white miso soup. And that was very popular. So kelp and bonito dashi itself, I think, if we take it there and export there, I think it will still take time for overseas people to understand the essence of simple Japanese dashi. Well, my research interest is palatability, smell, and taste. Smell sense is not going to change. It's very difficult. We grew up with kelp and bonito dashi, but for overseas people who did not grow up with this flavor, it's very difficult for them to understand it. Is there any trends to use alternative dashi to overcome this problem? Well, French bouillon, that's a soup stock. Young chefs do not know this. So what we have to pay attention to and we have to be careful about is, one of the important things that you said before is that addition is easier than subtraction. Now, this is something I learned from Japanese cuisine, the essence of subtraction. When I was trained by Alain Chappelle, great chef, he told me to make a veal juice soup stock. So you put the meat and the carrot, and then he said, no, that's not the way to do it. You have to grill the meat first, and then you have to reduce the fat to minimum and put minimum amount of water and then boil it very slowly, and then you get a very deep flavor without fat. And then that's the basis of the recipe. So what is important is that for the young generation, we have to get them to use the 5 senses when they cook. Yes, olfactory memory is very long-lasting. So you have to experience it every day. We have to transmit the know-how. It's not just a matter of copying the recipe and giving to them. We have to get them to actually do it and then have the experience. That is the most important thing. I think especially when we are exporting from one country to another, this is an important element. On the other hand, among Kyoto restaurants, Mr. Sasaki's restaurant is innovative in a way. So he's not completely bound by the traditions. So that's what his stance is, and he wants to be very clear about that.
Well, I don't know whether I should share my real gut feelings. When it comes to Kyoto cuisine, with the tradition, it was succeeded from generation to generation. So I will share my gut feelings. While I was an apprentice in the Japanese cuisine, I can take the analogy of 3 festivals, Aoi, Jidai, GION festivals. Whichever festivity you go to, you just walk on the street. That's all you do at the time of festival, with authenticity and very nice formality of Kyoto. But Kyoto cuisine is something like the festivals in Kyoto. For example, come to us and come and join us in the dinner 3 or 4 days. What did you like most? Then you don't know how to respond. That's the Japanese cuisine. But in the case of French, yes, there was the fish, entree, and meat. And before that, there was the hors d'oeuvres and the duck was good, and how the duck was boiled was good. Yes, the bonito, which was boiled, was very good in the Japanese cuisine. Few people answer that way. So there is the very good parts and bad parts, and there has to be the quick response, whichever dishes you want. I want to get the quick response. And one additional dish I would like to have fun with, as was presented on the flan dish. We aesthetically decorated the dish with the Japanese style of presentation. That's the fun I wanted to express, something memorable. Maybe from French side, I am stealing a lot of techniques. And as was shown earlier, so there was a shift to the smaller dished food. It looks like there is the retrogression, or maybe sometimes coming closer from Japanese to the French. It may be go crossing and intersect each other. So there are longings each other. Mr. Marx, any feelings? Yes, indeed. French cuisines and Japanese cuisine, all the chefs respect each other. I was very much interested in Mr. Sasaki's comment. Yes, for the first time I dined in your restaurant, Mr. Sasaki, I felt the same way. With his signature, that was a signature dish, just like the novel by the writer. And you have to take a risk in doing something challenging. Indeed, Mr. Sasaki, in firing and timing of preparation, whichever is needed, he is equipped with the excellent techniques. And he can act also as a showman outside of the scope of the standard. It's a very difficult job for a chef to do that. Very instantaneous memory and recollection for people is something which is very difficult to create. And finally, when I meet him, just like the composer who makes the music, I was very much influenced. And of course, basics are all mastered by them. And when you draw the picture in the art, you try to do this outside of the scope of the frame. In the past 15 years, I believe there is a good sign of direction for the furtherance and development of the Japanese cuisines. And it's more like a show, teppanyaki and sushi counter. It's a sort of the show. And you come closer to the consumers and customers. And they were able to enjoy a very quickly fading memory in your minds. I believe a lot of Japanese chefs are expected to go inroads to overseas. So are they supposed to be acting as the artists or the writers of the novelists? Of course, they should, yes. They have to be prudent, be it whether it is French cuisine or Japanese cuisine. In our restaurant, we have to master the basics, and that has to be communicated to the young people. We hope to increase those young people. It's not that there is only French cuisine or Japanese cuisine. Our stage is the global stage. We hope that we will be able to demonstrate our techniques. Earlier, in the DVD, you have used the sorbet of Japanese sake. How did you come up with that idea? Well, in Japan, while I was working and studying the various Japanese ingredients and taste attached to that, umami of Japanese cuisines, respect for nature, sea, and fermentation, just like natto. I was very much interested in those Japanese food, in ingredients and confectionaries. They use a lot of enzymes or the yeast, and yeast is contained in sake. Although with a little bit of sugar content, you can also utilize those yeast. Why is it that they started to prepare this? What is the background? How they succeeded? Sake is something which can move me. Water from the mountain, pure mountain water, is the basis for creating and brewing sake. Indeed, that location is reflected in sake. I wanted to use this. So I wanted to express my feelings that I'm interested in the plate. I am so glad to hear that in front of such audience. Thank you very much for your compliments. Yes, Mr. Marx. He loves Japan very much. He's the judo player, and he's got the black belt with the 3 levels in the grades. And also, he's the master of kendo. And he did have the very deep notion of the Japanese culture, and I am so glad that he made such comments. Now, between French cuisine and Japanese cuisine, when I make a comparison, the dessert does have the strong weight in French cuisine. Towards dessert as the destination, they are moving. Sometimes you try to lighten the first plate, and on the second plate, you try to have more heavy stuff. So there is a connection between the plates. But in the Japanese cuisine, there is not much connection. Each one of them is independent. Maybe at the risk of repeating it, because there is no difference in the level. Of course, the plates are made in Imari and the other prestigious, authentic places, but you have to appreciate the dishes, and the portion of the dishes itself becomes smaller. No subtraction, no addition, and very mediocre, very plain dishes are something which are created. What about you, Mr. Marx? Indeed, the dessert in French cuisine is something which was added at the very end with the major weight. Pâtissier, I always tell them, you have to have the creativity. By the time they reach the dessert course, they are not hungry. So it has to be the retention of the appetite until you reach the dessert, starting from the salty food entree to sweet dessert with the imagination. Pâtissiers have to create something which can attract the people's appetite. 20 years ago, I was very much surprised there was no dessert. I thought that was good because there was no dessert in the Japanese cuisine, because Japanese cuisine is now being westernized, and little by little the dessert was added. But the dessert is rather too much to be added in the Japanese cuisine, including myself, sugar content and fat aspect. We want to reduce that as much as possible, replaced by the fruitness of the fresh fruits to end the course.
Well, we wish that we had more time to continue, but there are signs to tell me that 5 more minutes. So, as you heard, these 2 chefs, one is a French chef interested in Japanese food. The other is Japanese chef, but he wants to go beyond tradition to become more global. But their comments and their messages are very similar, or mainly, probably the core of their messages are the same. So both Japanese cuisine and French cuisine, the important thing is healthy and makes customer happy, and then leave big impression, and then sense of achievement for chefs. And I think this is universal. Fortunately, as we saw, Japanese cuisine is very much based on tradition. Traditionally has very low fat content, and traditionally naturally uses seasonal ingredients. So that's a natural advantage that Japanese food has. So as I listen to their conversation, I think Japanese chefs are sort of lucky because within the traditions and the traditional techniques, Japanese food already contained things that will be attractive to overseas. So those good essences, you have something to promote to people and overseas to make Japan fans. And Mr. Marx very much understands the core essence of Japanese food, Japanese cuisine. He's a big supporter of Japanese food. So I'd like to encourage both of you to promote the advantages of Japanese food overseas, Japanese cuisine overseas. Thank you very much.